What if the biggest change in your life doesn't come from learning something new, but from seeing the same reality through a completely different lens? Most people believe success comes from working harder, making better decisions, or waiting for the perfect opportunity. But what if the real reason they stay stuck has nothing to do with effort at all? Imagine waking up tomorrow with the exact same job, the same bank account, the same challenges, and yet making completely different choices. Not because your circumstances changed, but because one invisible shift inside your mind changed everything. That's the difference you'll discover today. This isn't another collection of motivational advice or feel-good habits you've heard 100 times before. It's a deeper way of thinking that quietly separates people who stay trapped in cycles of doubt, fear, and frustration from those who keep moving forward, even when life gives them no certainty. Along the way, you'll uncover why your mind keeps pulling you toward familiar mistakes, why chasing certainty secretly steals your confidence, and why the strongest people aren't the ones who know the future, they're the ones who no longer need to. Each chapter builds on the last, revealing a piece of a puzzle that most people never even realize they're trying to solve. And don't make the mistake of leaving early, because the final lesson brings everything together with one simple realization that has the power to permanently change how you make decisions, handle pressure, and approach every opportunity that comes your way. If this journey challenges the way you think, let me know in the comments which idea hits you the hardest. And if you believe more people need to hear this message, share it with someone who's searching for a breakthrough. Subscribe and stay with us until the very end, because sometimes one shift doesn't just change your thinking, it changes the person you become. Chapter 1. The Invisible Belief That Controls. Every decision. Have you ever wondered why two people can face the exact same situation and walk away with completely different results? One sees possibility, the other sees danger. One takes action, the other hesitates. At first, it looks like a difference in talent, intelligence, or luck. But if you look closer, you'll notice something far more powerful hiding beneath the surface. Every decision begins long before you realize you're making it. Picture yourself standing at the edge of a thick forest. There are countless paths ahead. None of them reveal where they end. Yet almost instantly, your mind whispers which path feels safe and which one feels risky. The strange part is that those whispers rarely come from reality. They come from beliefs you've carried for years without ever questioning them. Most people think they respond to facts. In truth, they respond to the meaning they give those facts. The event is rarely the problem. The interpretation is. Imagine two people hearing the word failure. One hears proof that they're not good enough. The other hears feedback. The event is identical. The emotional experience is completely different because of one invisible belief. This hidden belief quietly shapes your confidence, your relationships, your financial choices, and even the opportunities you notice. It determines whether uncertainty feels like a threat or an invitation. It decides whether you move forward or stay exactly where you are while convincing yourself you're simply being careful. The mind loves familiar stories, even painful ones. Why? Because familiarity feels safer than the unknown. Your brain would often rather repeat an old pattern than risk creating a new one. That's why so many people keep living the same year over and over, believing they're waiting for the right moment, when they're really protecting an old belief they never chose consciously. Now ask yourself something uncomfortable. What if the biggest obstacle in your life isn't outside you? What if it's a story you've repeated so many times that it now feels like the truth? This is where real change begins. Not by forcing yourself to think positively, not by pretending fear doesn't exist, but by recognizing that every belief acts like a pair of invisible glasses. You don't see the world as it is. You see it through the lens you've been wearing. Change the lens, and the same world suddenly offers different possibilities. That realization can feel unsettling, but it can also be incredibly freeing. Because if a belief was learned, it can be questioned. If it can be questioned, it can be replaced. And once that happens, decisions that once felt impossible begin to feel natural, not because life became easier, but because you stopped letting an invisible story decide your future. Yet recognizing the hidden belief is only the first step. The next discovery is even more surprising because the force protecting that belief isn't logic, it's fear. Chapter 2. The one mental shift that breaks the cycle of fear. Fear has a strange way of disguising itself. It rarely introduces itself as fear. Instead, it calls itself being realistic. It calls itself waiting for the right time. It calls itself needing one more piece of information before taking action. And because those excuses sound reasonable, most people never realize they're being controlled by the very thing they're trying to avoid. Picture an experienced sailor standing at the edge of the ocean. He knows the sea will never become perfectly calm. If he waits for a day without waves, he'll stay in the harbor forever. Yet this is exactly how many people approach life. They believe confidence comes first and action comes later. But reality works in the opposite direction. Confidence is rarely the cause. It is the result. Think about the first time you learned to ride a bicycle. You didn't wait until you felt fearless before climbing on. You climbed on while your hands were shaking. You wobbled. You lost balance. Maybe you even fell. But with every attempt, something inside your mind changed. The fear didn't disappear because someone convinced you with words. It faded because your experience slowly replaced your imagination. That's the shift most people never make. They spend years fighting fear instead of understanding it. Here's the hidden truth. Fear grows strongest when your imagination knows more than your experience. The less experience you have, the more space your mind has to invent disasters that haven't happened. It creates stories filled with rejection, failure, embarrassment, and regret. And because the brain cannot always distinguish between a vividly imagined threat and a real one, your body reacts as if the danger is already here. Your heart races. Your thoughts speed up. Your confidence disappears. Not because reality became dangerous, but because your imagination became louder than the truth. Now imagine replacing one question. Instead of asking, "What if everything goes wrong?" Ask yourself, "What if I'm only reacting to a story my mind created?" That single question changes everything. It creates a small gap between you and your emotions. Inside that gap, you gain something incredibly valuable: choice. You stop treating every feeling as a command. You stop believing every fearful thought deserves obedience. You stop waiting for certainty that never arrives. Instead, you begin acting from intention rather than emotion. That doesn't mean fear disappears overnight. It means fear loses its authority. You move anyway. You learn anyway. You grow anyway. And with every step, the old cycle becomes weaker, because your actions begin teaching your mind a new reality, one where uncertainty is no longer the enemy, but simply the price of progress. But even after breaking free from fear, one powerful habit continues to trap almost everyone: the habit of believing they must know what happens next before they can trust themselves. And that illusion is about to be challenged. Chapter 3. Why consistency begins when you stop chasing certainty. Imagine an archer standing with a perfectly crafted bow, a steady hand, and complete focus. The target is clear. The wind is calm. Everything is ready, except for one thing. The archer refuses to release the arrow until he can guarantee it will hit the center. How long will he stand there? Maybe minutes, maybe hours, maybe forever. It sounds absurd, yet this is exactly how most people live. They keep preparing, planning, analyzing, and waiting for the moment when success feels guaranteed. They tell themselves they're being responsible. But beneath that careful planning is something much deeper: a desperate search for certainty. Here's the problem. Life has never made that promise. No opportunity arrives with a guarantee. No decision comes with a complete map of the future. Yet the human mind craves certainty because certainty feels safe. It wants to eliminate every possible risk before taking the first step. But the price of certainty is often opportunity. Think about it. The people who seem calm under pressure aren't calm because they know exactly what's going to happen. They're calm because they've stopped demanding that life reveal the ending before they're willing to begin. That's a completely different way of thinking. Most people measure success by asking, "Did I get the result I wanted?" But that question creates an emotional roller coaster. A good result makes you feel brilliant. A bad result makes you question yourself. Your confidence rises and falls with every outcome, leaving your emotions in control. Now imagine asking a different question. Did I make the best decision I could with the information I had? Suddenly, everything changes. Your attention shifts away from what you cannot control and toward what you can. Your preparation, your discipline, your choices, your consistency. This is where real confidence is built, not from winning every time, but from knowing you can trust yourself, regardless of the outcome. Picture a skilled gardener planting seeds. Every morning they water the soil, they remove weeds, they care for the garden with patience. They don't dig up the seeds every evening to check whether they're growing. They understand that growth happens beneath the surface long before it becomes visible. Your progress works the same way. Every disciplined decision is another seed. Every thoughtful action strengthens your foundation. Every moment you choose consistency over certainty, you're becoming someone who no longer depends on perfect conditions to move forward. And something remarkable begins to happen. You stop fearing temporary setbacks because you realize they cannot define a process built on discipline. You stop chasing quick victories because you're building something much more valuable, a mindset that remains steady whether today's result feels like success or failure. That's the moment everything starts to change. Because once you stop needing certainty, you're finally free to see the world for what it truly is. Not a place of guarantees, but a place of endless possibilities waiting for those who are willing to think differently. And that realization leads to the most powerful shift of all. Chapter 4. Thinking in probabilities instead of emotions. Imagine you're standing at a crossroads with two paths in front of you. One path feels comfortable because you've walked it 100 times. The other disappears into the fog. You can't see where it leads. Instantly, your emotions begin making predictions. What if this is the wrong choice? What if I fail? What if I regret it? Notice something important. None of those questions describe reality. They describe possibilities, and possibilities are not facts. Yet most people spend their lives reacting to possibilities as if they've already happened. This is where almost every bad decision begins. When emotions take control, every outcome feels personal. A setback becomes proof that you're not capable. A rejection becomes proof that you're not worthy. One mistake suddenly feels like the definition of who you are, instead of just one moment in a much larger journey. But there's another way to think. Picture a professional poker player sitting at a table. Every hand is different. Even the strongest cards don't guarantee victory, and even weak hands sometimes win. The experienced player understands something that beginners never do. A good decision doesn't always produce a good outcome, and a bad outcome doesn't always mean the decision was bad. That's one of the hardest truths to accept, because the human mind wants simple stories. It wants to believe that success always rewards intelligence and failure always exposes weakness. Reality is far more complex. Life is a game of probabilities, not certainties. Every choice simply increases or decreases the likelihood of a certain result. That's all. Once you understand this, something incredible happens. You stop attaching your identity to every outcome. You stop celebrating yourself too much after a win. You stop tearing yourself apart after a loss. Instead, you become curious. What can this experience teach me? That question is more powerful than any emotion because it keeps you moving forward. Think about a scientist running an experiment. If one experiment fails, they don't throw away their entire career. They adjust the variables, collect new information, and try again. Failure isn't an emotional verdict. It's data. Imagine approaching your own life the same way. Every conversation, every opportunity, every challenge, every decision, not as a final judgment of your worth, but as information helping you make better choices tomorrow. Suddenly, fear loses its grip, because you're no longer trying to be perfect. You're trying to become better. And that's a goal you can reach every single day. The people who create extraordinary lives aren't the ones who avoid uncertainty. They're the ones who understand that uncertainty is built into every meaningful journey. Instead of demanding guarantees, they trust their process, refine their thinking, and keep showing up. That is the quiet power of thinking and probabilities. It replaces emotional reactions with steady judgment. It transforms setbacks into lessons. And over time, it shapes something far more valuable than success itself. It shapes the kind of person who can thrive in any situation because they no longer depend on certainty to move forward. Chapter 5. Becoming the person who trusts the process over the outcome. Imagine climbing a mountain before sunrise. The air is cold. The path is steep. You can't see the peak because it's hidden behind clouds. Every step feels small, almost meaningless. If your only source of motivation is seeing the summit, you'll probably turn back long before you get there. But something changes when you fall in love with the climb itself. That is the final shift. Most people spend their lives chasing outcomes. They tell themselves, I'll be confident when I succeed. I'll be happy when I reach my goal. I'll believe in myself after I finally prove I'm good enough. But those promises never end. Every achievement creates another destination. Every victory creates another expectation. And before long, your happiness depends on a future that never seems to arrive. Now imagine living differently. Imagine waking up each morning with one simple mission, not to control what happens, but to control who you become. Because that's the only part that truly belongs to you. The world will always be unpredictable. People will surprise you. Plans will fail. Opportunities will appear without warning. Some days you'll win. Other days you'll lose. None of that changes the person you're choosing to become. Think of a master craftsman carving a piece of wood. He doesn't rush because he's obsessed with finishing. He pays attention to every cut, every detail, every movement. The masterpiece isn't created in the final hour. It's created in thousands of quiet moments that nobody else notices. Your character is built the same way. Every time you choose patience over panic. Every time you choose discipline over comfort. Every time you choose learning over ego, you're carving a stronger version of yourself. Slowly, silently, powerfully. One day, people will look at your confidence and call it natural. They'll admire your calm under pressure. They'll wonder what secret gave you such consistency. They won't see the countless invisible decisions that shaped you long before the results appeared. And that's the greatest lesson of all. The life you want is not created by one perfect opportunity. It's created by the person you become while pursuing it. When your identity is built on the process instead of the outcome, failure can no longer destroy you. Success can no longer distract you. Fear can no longer control you. Because your confidence no longer depends on what happens around you. It comes from knowing that no matter what today brings, you'll continue showing up with the same discipline, the same curiosity, and the same commitment to growth. That is true freedom. Not freedom from uncertainty, freedom from being ruled by it. So the next time life asks you to step into the unknown, don't ask whether the outcome is guaranteed. Ask a better question. Who am I becoming by taking this step? Because in the end, one shift really can change everything. Not the world around you, but the person who walks through it. And once that person changes, everything else begins to change with them.